Thanks for tuning in to VSB After the Bell. I'm your host, Gianna Chow. VSB, otherwise known as the Vancouver School Board, is located on the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The district is among the most diverse school systems in Canada, with an annual enrollment of just under 50,000 students, from kindergarten to grade 12 and adult education students.
Hey yo ho ho, hey yo, hey yo, hey yo ho ho, hey yo ho.
That was Chaz Desjardins, Acting Director of Instruction for Indigenous Education, sharing the Gathering Strength song. We'll talk more about that and the meaning behind this song later in the podcast. As we approach National Indigenous Peoples Day on June 21st, this month on the podcast, we talk about Indigenous Matters. One of the 3 goals of the Vancouver School District's education plan outlines an effort to continue our reconciliation journey with First Nations, Metis, and Inuit by increasing knowledge, awareness, appreciation of, and respect for Indigenous histories, traditions, cultures, and contributions. Achieving this goal, however, does not rest solely with the district's Indigenous Education Department. Instead, the goal puts the onus on all educators, including those who are non-Indigenous, to help bring Indigenous knowledge and practice into the classroom. To tell us more about how this is done, we have Stacey McEachern, a teacher at Eric Hamber Secondary, and Prairie Anderson, a grade 10 student from Lord Byng, with us today. We also have Chaz Desjardins, who you just heard share the Gathering Strength song with us. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you.
Before we start, can each of you introduce yourself? Maybe starting with Chaz.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chaz Desjardins. My traditional name is Kaminisu Bisuat, which translates from Nihiawiwin into English as Helper of Thunderbirds. I am the daughter of the late Robert Edmund Desjardins, Neheo Métis, and daughter of Diane Lorraine Johnson, whose settler ancestry is English, French, and Spanish. I'm a citizen of the Cold Lake First Nations, Treaty 6 Iskway, and a proud mother of 2 young daughters, my oldest being Paige, who is 18, and my youngest being Kaylin, who's 11, and I'm the Acting Director of Instruction for Indigenous Education with the Vancouver School Board.
My name is Prairie Anderson. I've lived in Vancouver my whole life, and I'm a 5th-generation Vancouverite on my dad's side, and on my mom's side, I am Scottish and Cree Métis. I go to Lord Byng Secondary, and I'm grade 10, and I play the violin with the Byng Orchestra.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stacey McEachern. I am a teacher at Eric Hamber Secondary since 2008, and I've been an educator since 2001. I am Anishinaabe Kwe on my mother's side, and also settler Scottish, English, Irish, and French. I am happy to be here today. Thank you.
Chaz, you sang and drummed the Gathering Strength song at the beginning. Can you explain why and what's the song's significance?
Well, the drum is important in many Indigenous nations. For myself personally, I'm a drum carrier, and there are a lot of protocols and teachings that come with it. For me, the drum is about medicine, and when I'm in need of good medicine, the songs I sing take me home and make me feel better. All songs have meaning and importance. And so when we receive a song, we receive a song from an elder or a guide. They will share a song with us. And this song was shared with me by a really good friend. The elder, Jerry Ullman from the Stayatmik Nation, has gifted the song for people. And so the teaching of the song is called the Gathering Strength song. And how it's been shared with me is when you are in need of strength, the song will come to you. And so when we listen to songs and those songs that are public, you hope that the song may hit your heart. So at a time when you're in need of that song will come back to you. And some of us carry drums, some of us don't. You don't need a drum to sing a song. All you need to is remember the song when you're in need of the song and at that time. everyone's journey on reconciliation is hard, and many are on different parts of the pathway for reconciliation. So keep this song in mind when you are hitting a point where you're finding yourself struggling, and with the hope that this will bring you some strength to continue on to the journey that you are moving forward with.
Thanks again for sharing that song with our listeners and teaching us the significance of drumming. Stacey, I also understand you teach an Indigenous focus class.
That's correct.
Oh, can you let listeners know what that is?
Yes, I teach BC First Peoples 12, which up until next year has been an elective course for the ministry and at my school. And for the past 11 years, I've had either 1 or 2 blocks of predominantly non-Indigenous students in the course. It is focused on BC nations, cultures, traditions, languages, and the celebration of everything about the peoples of this land now called British Columbia, but it's also extending to other parts of what is now called Canada to look at the colonial project and how it has impacted Indigenous lives and lands since contact. So it's really a very important course that is very rich in information, but also important truths for all Canadians to know. And ever since I've started, I've forever had students returning after graduation or after they've taken the course to say, oh, I get it now. And I learned so much that I still carry with me. So I think that is a really important piece, that the knowledge extends beyond just the classroom walls.
Maybe for listeners who are non-Indigenous, can you explain a little bit more when students come back and say they get it now? What do they get, the Indigenous ways of learning? Maybe a little bit more detail on that.
I think just when we look at, I have a student who emailed me and said, I'm going into oceanography at UBC, and I understand now that it's not a choice what is happening, and what I'm choosing to do in my career is necessity. And what I've learned in your course about Indigenous worldview and stewardship and connection to the land, I now better understand how to do that work because I have a broader and more holistic view myself of what needs to be done to protect the oceans. And she mentioned that it was incumbent upon her, and she wasn't sure what she was going to do, but she said, once I stepped foot into that course, I realized this is what I need to do. And so I think just the reflections back that I've received from students is I now understand more about reconciliation, or I now understand more about what unceded means, or I now understand how to better care for the land and have a better relationship with the land. And I think just the broadening perspective of a worldview and way of being human that has been suppressed and oppressed for so long, they are now just broadened in their own perspective of who they are and what their history of displacement might be in their own families. And so I think just a broader perspective of just the story of Canada as well.
So how do we even start our reconciliation journey and begin our Indigenous learning for, particularly for those who are non-Indigenous? As an educator, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I think when there's fear to do something wrong, I think the best thing to do, because that's commonly what one of the hurdles is for non-Indigenous educators, is to really make sure it's done right, in the sense of you're representing in your classroom, the knowledge isn't necessarily your own. And so am I following the right protocols? Do I have permission to say what I'm going to say? But then there's also the pieces around, well, those truths that are being unveiled, and it's hard, heavy, emotional labor. But it's also really important that people are doing their own work. It's not the Indigenous person on staff or community to be the ones to fully educate the educators. So there's a lot of work that has to be done just as a person to be understanding of what it's all about. What is the journey of reconciliation? What is my role as an educator on this journey? And that has to come from within. And then I guess just transferring that into the classroom would be to be respectful of what is the truth? How can I verify it? What can I share? What is sacred? And just understanding those protocols is important as well.
So you mentioned that people have to do their own work. Are there some specific tips that you can give listeners if they are interested in, kind of going through their own reconciliation journey?
Well, just, adding on to the previous comments from Stacey, it is a personal journey. And I think Canadians, non-Indigenous people need to open their hearts and open their minds. And, I've heard from elders, the longest journey anyone can take is from their head to their heart. And so we need to be open to continuing to learn, which is a lifelong journey. And, our journey takes us around many corners, and it's going to take us over many hills, and it's going to take us over many mountains, and to be prepared to do that hard work. And there's no right or wrong way to begin that journey for reconciliation, but it's imperative now in the day that we live that, the truth is there. It's in front of everyone. And so everyone's work, making the invisible visible, is something that has to be taken on collectively, as all Canadians in society need to do that. And so there's really no right or wrong work. Or way, I should say, to begin the work. I think my advice to people when they begin that reconciliation journey is just really being humble and being honest as they move forward, and getting out into the community and connecting with people who can help support you, and being kind of truthful with your intentions, with your own personal learning, is really important. And that there are many people out there who can assist you, but you need to be honest with your intentions and your truthfulness of how you're approaching the work, and do you really want to do it? And so that's just a few points of suggestion that I have.
So, reconciliation is not easy. Right, the truths are sometimes it's heavy, and it's hard to learn about. What are the things that you found most difficult in approaching reconciliation in the educational system, Chaz?
I think for myself, I've had to reconcile this history, not ever receiving the history of the education I should have been given when I was going to school, the time that I was going to school. I'm very grateful now that of the work of Indigenous education in the last probably 10 years has really transformed at such a great speed. And I know that my children have a huge and much deeper understanding of what it means to be Indigenous. My children are proud, in particular, my youngest one, who attends, cultural classes in North Vancouver, and has received lots of drum teachings. But, it's imperative for myself as a parent to provide these opportunities for her. But when I think about the education I received, is nowhere near the education that children are receiving today. And for me, that gives me hope to know that children are receiving a much more of a cultural education, a much more of a truthful education than they did when I was going to school back in the early 1980s, where, there was no visible of anything Indigenous in education. And in fact, a lot of people, we had no idea that other people were Indigenous because of the stigma attached to being an Indigenous person. And so, I've had to come to reconcile this whole history of through my whole journey. And I'm, had to, reach out to my own communities. And many of us live away from our home communities. And we, colonization has done a very good job of severing us from our kinship relations and our ancestors. And so for many of us who didn't get that education, we are the ones now who are finding those pathways back home. And so we bring our children with us, and we know that it's imperative that we provide these opportunities. But education now is in a way better place than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And really from, the time of our ancestors and our relatives many who had to attend residential schools. So it's not perfect. There's always hope on the horizon, and we continue to transform Indigenous education by our own physical presence as Indigenous peoples in the education system.
I 100% agree with that. I can even say when I went to school too in Vancouver, there was not as much emphasis on Indigenous ways, Indigenous learnings, even the land acknowledgement. But I want to hear from Prairie as a student. What has been your experience at school? Can you recall a time where you felt what you were learning honored your Indigenous heritage?
Well, I started high school peak COVID, so it was very different from what it was now. It was we only went for an hour a day, so it was very hard to connect with teachers and friends, make friends in general, and just learning was made very difficult that way. But I really do love school, and it's gone better every year. And now there's I'm just a part of so much in school, all the different communities and just being there in general. I just really like it. So
I mentioned land acknowledgements earlier. I know that when I was going up in school, and I'm sure Chaz and Stacy, we didn't do land acknowledgements. But now it's become a standard protocol, and at assemblies that you see at schools, and maybe even presentations for you, and at gatherings for sure. Prairie, from your perspective, do you know why we do them and why it's so important?
Yeah, I do. And I think I have gotten, as I said, I was part of the Lord Byng Orchestra, so I have gotten to do land acknowledgements through that as a Métis person, so I've done that, and I do think it is very important to acknowledge and share and everything that this is the First Nations and such land, and it is very important.
As a student, what are you learning in school that's related to Indigenous ways? Do you have some specific examples that maybe you can share with parents who don't, or adults who don't have children in the education system, or maybe a newcomer who, this is very different for them, and for them to learn? How is a student experiencing the reconciliation journey that we talk about?
Well, it's brought up a lot in social studies, so it's always being mentioned there, and it's brought to attention, very much so, and just placed front and center. So it's that's something that they take a lot of time teaching about and just incorporating in through all the different lessons that all the teachers teach at school.
And when you hear about topics like the unidentified children being found, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel sad, but it's also getting more attention now, and I feel that is very important to bring it up and to let everyone feel these maybe uncomfortable emotions, because it is happening and it had happened, so it is very important.
From an educator's lens, can you tell us why are land acknowledgements important?
Well, the first thing to talk about is how they can't be performative acts. So I think they're important because you are honoring the people and the land and giving the rights that they deserve, and honoring the stewardship and the health of the lands and the peoples on whose territory we live. And it's a gesture of gratitude, but it's also acknowledgement that we are benefiting from the displacement of many Indigenous peoples. And as Chaz said, many people have literally been displaced from the territory that we now call home. wherever we live across Turtle Island. So it's really important to acknowledge not just the gratitude for the land, the nature, the beauty, and how it's been cared for since time immemorial, but also to acknowledge that this is the truth, that because Indigenous people have been displaced and oppressive legislation has led to fracturing of communities, that settler communities have benefited, and to acknowledge that gratitude too as well. So the performative action around just saying the words and not knowing the meaning or not having any personal connection to the words that you're saying is problematic and harmful. So I think it's important to teach students that you have to be sure what you're saying and why you're saying it, and to have it come from the heart.
How do you foster an appreciation of Indigenous ways of learning and knowing for non-Indigenous students?
I always start talking about identity with my students so that they are aware that we are all humans and we all have stories to tell. And so again, as I said earlier, I want students to recognize that their family story, and if they are identifying as a settler to this land, that their story probably has some displacement or fracturing of their own kinship and community. And so just to open their heart to the empathy of human to human kinship and compassion. And then just the Indigenous ways of seeing knowledge is to build a relationship with the knowledge. And as an educator, I first and foremost build a relationship with my students. And it's really very relational and important to learn from our students and be reciprocal in that learning. So always being open to what students have to teach me is really important. And then just the self-reflective piece and the lifelong learning and the cyclical learning, that just developing my lessons and my year, or now my semester, in a way that is always telling a story and always coming back to key points of those stories, so that we can just see that cyclical nature of learning, that we always come back and then we move forward, and that learning doesn't stop once they're finished in my class. And learning comes in different ways and can be demonstrated in different ways. So,
from my perspective as a non-Indigenous person, I think I've learned over the years, it's not just empathy and compassion, but it's also the openness and willingness to learn, because, I was brought up in the colonial ways and that's all I see. And so sometimes it is hard to change that mindset, but being open to learning that it's completely different with Indigenous ways is a door that allows you to step into and learn about what could be, where you carry that empathy and compassion and learn of the Indigenous ways. So what does it mean to be an ally, and how can we support and lift up the Indigenous students and Indigenous educators in our district?
I think to be an ally is to be open to continuing to learn, to understand that Indigenous people are diverse with their multiple worldviews. We all come from different places and different people, and we're all connected to these places. And from those places that we're connected to, those places inform how we see ourselves in the world. And I think as, good allies, and from my own understanding of working within this district, I've come to see that good allies know they've come to learn when they need to step forward, when they need to step to the side, and when they need to step behind. And I think that's really an important thing that are, the allies who want to be allied to Indigenous education, to nations, to communities, to students, to Indigenous educators in the system, is really understanding that. And it's, a really tough lesson to learn. Because Eurocentric thought is quite competitive. And from an Indigenous understanding, we're all in the circle. And when we're all in the circle, we all see each other. And there's no hierarchy. And from Eurocentric thought, there is a hierarchy. So coming to understand a different philosophy of how we see each other and how we relate in the world, allies need to, as Stacey has shared, understand that Indigenous worldviews and communities and nations are very relational, and our kinship networks are really important. And that is the foundation of our way of being connected to land as a land base. We get all our, spirituality and our practices from the land and being in connection. And so we have many, many amazing allies in this district doing really good work. But it's really about, for me personally, it's about good relations. And I've shared this concept. It's a Nahiaweewan concept of good relations is foundational. It's a natural law within Nahio communities and society. But in order we need to be in good relations with one another. And so that's my one other advice for allies, is really to maintain good relations.
That's a great takeaway and a great phrase where you said, when to step forward, when to step beside, and when to step behind. That is something that we can all take away and think about when we are thinking about our reconciliation journey. Switching gears here, last year the province announced the new graduation requirements starting next year, the 2023 to 2024 school year, where all secondary students in BC must successfully complete at least 4 credits in an Indigenous focus course or coursework before graduating. What does this mean for students, and what course options are there in the Vancouver School Board?
Yes, this is true. There's a required mandated course where all BC students will need to graduate with 4 credits of Indigenous focus coursework. At the moment, we have BC First Peoples 12, Contemporary Indigenous Studies 12, and we have English First Peoples at the 10, 11, and 12 grade levels. But I'm also understanding that places can be or schools can be very creative, communities can be very creative of making a specific course for their community that could fit this requirement. But in Vancouver, I know these English and socials focused courses to be our main options.
So the courses that you mentioned, Indigenous First Peoples 12, is that available at every secondary school?
There are a number of provincial example courses that are available, and many of them were mentioned by Stacey. It depends on the schools and what teachers have historically been teaching those courses, or what are most likely going to be offered in the years to come. Based on student choice, we hope that moving forward, and this is such an amazing time in BC history where we actually have Indigenous focused courses are now mandated. So it's the first time that Indigenous histories are not elective courses. So our histories and languages and cultures are no longer elective, which I think is significant and historic in that regard. But we also have, as Stacey said, locally developed courses that are being developed in relation with the 3 nations and across the province. Any sort of locally developed course has to be done alongside the nation, and it has to be approved by the ministry in order for it to be a course offering. So that's really exciting because that's where we can have some amazing courses that are really land-based, like canoe culture and traditions. There are also Indigenous language courses that can be offered, and that's really dependent on where the capacity of the First Nations is. So if you're going to develop a course for Hunkaminam, or you're going to develop a course for Hoklaminam or another Indigenous language, that has to be done in and alongside in relation with the nation. And we hope in the future that we're going to have some of those courses established. So the future looks exciting for the diverse courses that are going to be offered. And much of the courses that Stacey has shared earlier that are being offered have been offered for a number of years. And it's what's significant about this moment is now they have to be offered. Kids have to graduate with 4 credits. So, what's exciting for me is how is this going to transform education 15 years from now, 25 years from now, right? And now that every student leaving the education system is going to have a 4-credit course of learning. And just think about the ripple effect that's going to have on non-Indigenous families. And those kids go home and they share the knowledge and the teachings that they've received from their educators in the classroom, the communities that they go in to learn alongside, where, we're going to be as a Canadian society 50 years from now. I think it's an exciting time. And I think this goes a long ways to continuing our reconciliation journey.
So what I'm hearing is there will be courses available to take to meet the graduation requirements. And it may not be the exact same courses at every single school, but there will be options for students and they will be able to complete those requirements. So Prairie, from your perspective, when you heard this, I know you're in grade 10 now. So when you heard that you have to take these courses by grade 12, what was your first reaction?
Well, I was excited to do them, and I'm doing a socials one and an English one, both of them next year. So I am happy to do that, and I'm excited to learn more and experience all the different cultures and
Awesome. Lastly, are there any resources that you would recommend to students, parents, or other educators who are interested in deepening their reconciliation journey or learning more about Indigenous practices?
There's so many options and books and films and blogs available. Too many, too numerous to number, but I know one off the top of my head is Chelsea Vowell's Indigenous Rights. It's really accessible reading. She mixes humor with fact, and it's informative, and it covers a lot of the big picture in short snippets. So anything that tweaks someone's interest there, they can then do a deeper dive into a book or, again, film or other digital source based on that topic. I know Bob Joseph's blog is really informative and accessible reading, quick reading as well. And then again, just springboarding into other options that people want to know about more from there.
Well, the one I'm reading currently is called Braiding Sweetgrass for Young Adults by Robin Wilkimmer and has been adapted by Monique Gray Smith. And I've only just started reading it. I'm only like a few chapters in, but it's already been very attention grabbing, and I've already learned so much from it.
I think for myself, there are so many amazing resources shared. I think, for all Canadians who are non-Indigenous who want to continue this journey, is you need to go into community. You need to open up your hearts and mind to being in relation with the nations. You need to attend events where it's open for non-Indigenous people to attend. You need to be in relation in the learning so that you can listen and you can observe, and then you can take that away. You need to be witness. A lot of learning from an Indigenous perspective needs to be relational. It needs to be experiential. And so get out there, get to know people, and don't be afraid, and attend events. It's amazing how much you'll learn by being in relation. And that's an Indigenous way of being, is learning by doing, hearing, observing, and experiential is key.
Thank you all for joining us today and sharing the good work you're doing to advance Indigenous knowledge and practice in our classrooms. Prairie, I want to thank you especially. It's really great to hear directly from students and to see how is this really impacting the future generations.
Thank you for having me. It's been such an honor to come and share my opinion and talk.
Thank you for the invite and for allowing us space to share today.
We have a reoccurring segment on the show called Matter of the Month, where we address the most talked about topics. Today, we're diving into a pressing issue that's been making headlines in our community: the lack of air conditioning in schools. With unexpected extreme hot weather hitting our region, families are expressing concerns about their children's comfort and well-being. Let's explore the situation in the Vancouver School District and discuss what we're doing. Joining us today is Hans Loeffelholz, Director of Enterprise Risk and Safety Compliance. Welcome, Hans. First off, can you tell listeners about your role in the district?
Sure. As the Director of Enterprise Risk and Safety Compliance, my role is to support and lead the strategic initiatives that impact employee safety around wellness. Our department, the Health and Safety Department, our focus is on promoting access to wellness initiatives and programs for employees, as well as looking at all aspects of employee safety. And this ensures that we're in compliance with WorkSafe BC regulations, as well as we have operational success for all groups within the Vancouver School Board.
So employee safety, ultimately will also impact student safety, correct?
Absolutely.
And on this topic, Hans, do schools in Vancouver have AC?
Well, that's an interesting question. A lot of our schools in the last 10 years have been considered for heat pumps, and a number of them actually have had heat pumps installed. So we do that depending on the funding that's available. So this is a really important piece of information to understand. These heat pumps are like air conditioning. It's pretty much doing the same job, and they're just a little bit more efficient. So they heat and cool our buildings.
Okay, so and from my personal experience, the heat pumps are, like you said, are almost just as efficient as air conditioners, minus a few technical details, but they do cool the area that you're in. The users don't really experience much of a difference. What about older schools? How do those buildings stay cool for students in the summer?
Well, it's interesting. So we have a few strategies, but maybe a little bit of background. I think what we have to realize is that the climate in Vancouver has changed over the years, and the type of extreme weather that we experience today is a little bit different than what we experienced a number of years ago. So our schools, some of them we have 110 sites, and they were built decades ago. Some of them are very old. So we don't have all the features built in like air conditioning. So for those schools, we have different strategies. We ask that, if we need to, we move to larger spaces where the air may be cooler. Some of the hot air goes to the top. So that could be a cafeteria or a gymnasium. In the morning, we ask our workers to open up the windows to let the cooler air in. So that gets the temperature of the building a lot cooler. We open up interior doors to allow the airflow. And we try to keep our blinds closed on windows so that the solar impact, so the impact from the sun coming in windows, isn't as significant to the learning space. All this is combined with most of our schools that have circulating heat systems or air systems. What we do is we have our building engineers turn those on as soon as they get in the morning, and that draws in the cooler temperature. So, in the morning, it might be around 14 degrees, and we try to draw in as much of that air into the building before school starts. So it's nice and cool to start the day.
Those are really good strategies. And I would find that you can also apply that to your own personal house if you do live in one, because many houses in Vancouver also don't have AC, especially the older ones. What can we do from an employee and student safety perspective if or when a space gets really hot?
Yeah, I've got, a department that is focused on the health and safety of our people. And what we'll do is we'll maintain a view of the 7 to 14 day forecast to see what's coming down. So I know this week it's going to be a little bit warmer Thursday, but not really as extreme as we've had a few weeks ago. So for our employees, we talk about strategies, and it's important to note that we have to acclimatize to the heat. So in May, a hot day in May is going to feel more significant than August when you're out in the summer or on the beach or something. So these early days are going to have the most impact, or feel like they have the most impact.
That's very interesting. But yeah, I think now that I'm looking back, May and August, probably the temperatures are quite similar on some days, especially what we've experienced the last couple of weeks. But because we expect it in August, it's almost like it's not as big of an impact than in May, when we were expecting maybe just high 15, 19, under 20 degrees.
So from the health and safety department, what we'll do is we'll go out to a space, we'll look at the room, and we'll see if they've implemented some of the strategies that we've talked about and make sure that they're in place. And we'll also monitor to ensure that we're in compliance to the WorkSafe BC standards.
Okay, and if they haven't complied with these standards, I guess you will be enforcing that or making sure that the schools do comply with them?
I wouldn't want to use the word enforce. We use a little bit softer language, but the idea is just to make sure that as many strategies as possible have been implemented. We want success. That's what we're looking for.
Yes, of course. From a health and safety lens, then, what do you do on days when you experience extreme heat?
Well, the first thing is that we want to make sure that everyone's staying hydrated. So if you need to, we bring a water bottle to work and keep that nice and cool. That's going to help keep your body temperature stable. Want to dress appropriately. So sometimes summer fashion can come a little early, and that's important. So wearing light colored clothing or light fitting clothing or loose fitting clothing, something that allows the air to sort of pass through and go over your skin is really good. Avoiding heavy clothing if you're indoors, and dark, heavy clothing if you're outdoors is really important. You can have a wet cloth or bandana if you're outside, but really trying to keep as much airflow around in your body cool. When it comes to activities, we usually suggest that we alter the intensity or the strain of the activity. So we prefer people to do light activities when it's really hot. So that may mean altering the type of physical education classes that are going on. But you can also take advantage of our natural shade and cooling. So a breeze underneath a tree is really important. So classes could go outside if that was available in their area. The other thing we want to remind everyone is to monitor for signs of heat stress, which can include heat exhaustion, heat cramps, things like that, and ultimately heat stroke. So it's very important that you understand the signs and symptoms and that you monitor for that.
That's excellent advice, Hans. Thanks for shedding light on this month's Matter of the Month.
You're welcome.
We hope this podcast has been informative and helpful to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps us improve and create more content that you'll like. Remember, we release episodes monthly on the last Thursday of the month. We'll catch up with you then. VSB After the Bell, produced by the VSB Communications Department. Special thanks to music teacher Mr. Bonnell and Nightingale Elementary students for the original theme song. Keep up to date with district news. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at VSB39 or Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vancouver School Board. And don't forget to subscribe to VSB After the Bell on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.